It's incredible that the majority of the world hasn't seen this.
Black Lives Matter released their 990 IRS filings. They collected $80 million. Where is that money?
It's not here. Everything looks worse than it was.
Where have you seen that money impacted throughout the city? So my producer just sent me a link. It is just shocking to me because of how much money was raised to think that where he lived, the bills weren't being covered. Super frustrating, but that's a dead end, so. And here's where it gets really interesting. Ready for some BLM pride? Another $200K went to escorts, BDSM workers, strippers, peep show workers, phone sex operators, and webcam performers. And then at that moment, it became personal. And I thought, not only am I going to say the truth, I am going to scream the truth louder than you can scream the lies.
Don't shoot! No peace! No justice! No peace! No peace! How could you stay?
Minnesota State Patrol Colonel Matt Langer has slammed any protesters who are breaking the law. He said, "The behaviours that we continue to see are unacceptable and we are not going to tolerate them. It is not acceptable and it will not be tolerated if you choose to do criminal activity and destroy property and throw objects and make it unsafe for people to come and exercise their First Amendment rights." Fox News contributor Kayleigh McEnany has condemned the protesters and says it leads to more deaths.
The bottom line is all of these folks who are defending rioting are in fact enabling a much more violent situation. National Review cited a study that found that in the 5 cities that where a viral incident with the police, a viral moment takes off and results in rioting, that they actually saw 900 excess homicide deaths. So this leads to death, to destruction, to chaos. And I would just say to all of these rioters and to those enabling it, just the words of Martin Luther King, who said, they are socially destructive riots. They are self-defeating, and I will continue to condemn riots and continue to say, my brothers and sisters, this is not the way. Let's follow in the footsteps of the great Martin Luther King Jr.
The divisive and aggressive BLM movement has increased its influence considerably over the past 2 years, and yet there is a great deal of ignorance about this group's ideological framework. They are not only race-obsessed, but they are Marxist. Just ask the founders about their ideology.
We actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
I'm now joined by Dr. Rakib Ehsan, Research Fellow at Henry Jackson Society, who wrote a fantastic piece for the Mail on BLM. Rakib, you have warned about the danger of adopting the US's racial grievance politics. Has BLM influenced how the UK approaches matters of economic equality and social cohesion?
Well, I'd say so, Rita. I always feel that there's been a brainless importation of divisive US racial culture war politics into the UK by British leftist activists who don't really understand the fundamental differences between the UK and US when it comes to race-related matters. Rita, I just want to remind your viewers of one particular incident in the UK where you had British protesters shouting, "Don't shoot," at British police officers, even though the vast majority are unarmed because of the importation of US racial grievances. You're seeing racial identity placed at the heart of very important discussions on complex forms of economic and social disadvantage when a myriad of social, cultural factors come into play when you look at those racial and ethnic disparities.
Oh, well, absolutely. You see them parroting the same words and phrases. It's almost like they take lessons in critical race theory. Now, we know BLM's focus extends beyond race. They have stated objectives. They're at least honest about it. They want to overthrow the capitalist system and defund the police, and yet they're backed so heavily by not only leftist politicians but the corporate world who've embraced this divisive identity politics. Why do you think that is, and what's been the impact of that?
Well, I think there, Rita, what you see there, there's a great deal of hypocrisy within the BLM social movement. You have activists and previous former leading members who have talked about being trained Marxists, that we need to dismantle the market economies across the West. But these are also individuals that have also profited a great deal when it comes to the shameless commercialization of grievance politics. They themselves have developed lavish property empires of their own. And I find it remarkable that you also have these individuals who promote various forms of public disorder, expressing support for direct action. And they do peddle anti-police narratives, such as stripping police forces of public resources. But they live in extremely secure and luxurious neighborhoods, which I think is quite remarkable. That if there was any disruption in those neighborhoods, I'm sure they would be the first people to call upon law enforcement to sort out any disturbances in their own areas. So what you see there's a real hypocrisy within these social movements, and that does include BLM. And those sort of radical objectives, whether it comes to dismantling the market economy, defunding the police, support for direct action. When you look at survey data in the UK, this doesn't only command very little support in the wider public, it commands very little support within Black British communities, and that really needs to be understood by our leading politicians.
That's a very important point, that majority of the Black population doesn't back these policies like defunding the police and overthrowing capitalism, and that point seems to be lost by people who just blindly follow BLM. Now, do you think Britain will ultimately succeed in rejecting this sort of divisive race politics, or is it too late already? Has the critical race theory poison and identity politics obsession already ingrained itself in the country?
Well, I think what's been really problematic in the UK, you've seen the spread of white privilege theories within our public institutions, remarkably, even within the National Health Service and our school system. Now, the Conservative government, members of the cabinet, such as Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi, they are looking to push back on that peddling of pseudo-intellectual race theories, you could say, within our public institutions. But a lot more has to be done. I think that the government itself really needs to press with an agenda which is rooted in equality of opportunity, but also pushes back with this sort of race-based obsessions. When we're looking at that one of the strongest determinants when it comes to the shaping of one's life chances is the kind of family that they're raised in. So family structure.
Absolutely. Family is critically important, Doctor, and always so great to hear from you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Reed.
Senators presents a proposal.
I am Peter Flaherty, Chairman of the National Legal and Policy Center. If we had an independent chair, the company would be less identified with Mr. Buffett's political activities. He's donated tens of billions to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. As Bill Gates explained when the company was still together, although the company bears our names, basically half our resources have come from Warren Buffett. If woke culture is the disease, then philanthropy is the virus. The Gates Foundation bankrolls the teaching of critical race theory around the country, including that math is inherently racist. The Gates Foundation offers a gender identity toolbox, which asserts that gender is a result of socially and culturally constructed ideas. This is a lie. Gender is not a cultural construct. It is a genetic and biological fact. You're not going to censor what I say, ma'am. I'm very sorry. And I'll appeal to the chair that I be allowed to continue. Sir?
You may continue, but you're under a 3-minute limitation.
Of course. We know how much Bill Gates cares about children. He met and traveled with Jeffrey Epstein many times after Epstein's convicted sex crimes. The Gates Foundation had a huge influence over the COVID response fiasco. The Gates Foundation may be the largest single donor to the dark money machine known as Arabella Associates. It funds causes like defunding the police, making American cities unlivable. Money goes also to groups conducting threats.